Welcome to Live a Little for this interesting and extra episode. Before we get back to our regular broadcast, can we say that? Is it broadcast?
Yeah, regular programming.
Regular programming, that's the word. This is 2 days after Pope Francis issued his brand new motto proprio, Traditionis custodes. So as people who are somewhat attached to the traditional Latin Mass, we wanted to talk about this, especially for me as a mother. I wanted to process this for people who are kind of stuck in this place of not quite knowing what to do with this, right? As laity, we are very limited what we can do. Obviously, we always pray for the Holy Father and for the unity of the Church. But when situations like these occur, we kind of find ourselves a little lost. So Angela and I decided to kind of hash this out on air a little bit today. Right, Angela? Were you as shocked as I was? Or I know we were expecting it a little bit, but what were your first reactions?
Yeah, my first reaction was anger, because that tends to be how I respond to things I don't like. But also sadness, just an immense sadness, because I just feel like it was such a misstep, and this will just continue to drive division in the Church. It's not going to bring unity, which is kind of the irony, I guess, of it all, because it sort of has felt like that's been the professed design of it all, right? It's the idea that we want to bring more unity in the Church, but really it feels like it's driving more of a wedge between people who love traditionalism and maybe those who don't like it for whatever reason. I don't know. What was your first reaction?
I think it was sadness, definitely. Like I was a little heartbroken. Not a little, a lot heartbroken. I in a way, I'm glad we knew it was coming, right? This has been in the kind of vines. Is that the word? Yeah. And I husband and I, we talked about it and we processed it a little bit, like what it would mean for our family. And we'll talk about it here in a bit, why this is such a big deal for us. But it was like I was sad. It in a filial way, right? Like you ask for this gift from your father, and then he kind of turns you down for no reason. And then you kind of feel sad. You don't even feel mad anymore. That's how I was, like.
Yeah, I think the mad anger has subsided. It really is a sadness in my view, because it feels lonely. I think, I don't know, with all the scandals and difficulties and trials that we've been facing, especially over the last couple of decades, with the sex scandals and then the Summer of Shame a few years back, and now here we are with this constant liturgical battle. It kind of feels like it's sort of, and I think a lot of our shepherds don't know what to do, and so it's sad to me that it feels as if we are sheep without a shepherd. Sometimes it feels lonely in that. And I think it kind of mirrors the father wound that so many of us have experienced in a physical way. And that's kind of being replicated in the Church. Like, that's just how I feel.
Right.
You know, there's a particular beauty and order in the TLM that so many of us are drawn to, because we're ordered towards beauty and goodness and truth. And it's sad that it's not seen by, those in the hierarchy, some in the hierarchy, as being valid, or that those desires are perhaps somehow disordered. Like, that's how I feel. I feel as if there's this sense that these desires for the traditional Latin Mass are somehow disordered.
Right. And I think maybe I wanted to talk about that a little bit today. Like, why our family is attracted to it and why you're attracted to it.
Yeah.
So let
Let's
me
talk
let me
about
begin.
you
Yeah.
wrote the book on it. Okay, just kidding. You wrote
Yes.
a
I
book
mean,
on
yeah, yeah.
it.
But
Yeah.
I mean, the book isn't personal. It's for people who go there and is so
I
so like
okay.
confused. So it's like for me, obviously I wasn't exposed to it. You know what? I grew up in a Muslim country. You're not gonna run into
Right.
any mass like easily. And of course, the only masses I were exposed to for a long time was no sort of mass. And coming from a Protestant, evangelical, and charismatic too, like the new mass looked so much better because I don't know, maybe I, I mean, a lot of people think it's because I grew up Muslim, which there could be, that could be one of the reasons. But I think the biggest reason is that my heart is so full of pride in different ways, right? There's intellectual pride,
Yeah.
there's an emotional pride that I want to do it everything myself, right? The intellectual pride of I know it all, right? Like, I mean, these are not, this is like, these are the struggles I face, you know? So when I went to my first Catholic Mass and people actually knelt for the consecration, I felt like this is great. Like, I mean, I didn't quite understand and I didn't believe in the real presence as a Protestant and all of that. But I was like, oh, okay, so God is slightly bigger than us. Because that's one of the things I really missed in a Protestant charismatic services that it was like Jesus is this teddy bear,
Yeah.
not not the word through whom the entire cosmos was created. Does it make sense? Like
Yeah,
I
there's
just didn't
more
get
things.
that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and then when I moved to England, that was interesting because then again, like I had never, like I was so unfamiliar with the history of the Catholic Church. This is like through still I'm still converting, but not soon after my confirmation, I started going to a Dominican rite mass, and that was like it was so beautiful that I felt like, okay, this truly feels like a sacrifice, and it feels like we all worship a God who was willing to die for us, and this is a God before whom I can kneel, right? This is why I was like, it's through my own it's because of my own sinfulness I need the Latin mass. It's not because I'm better than everybody else.
Right.
uh does that make sense? And I
Oh,
think
absolutely. Yep.
that's why I found it so comforting, like this reverence and this awe, and then I could go back into the world in a better place because of what Christ did. So that's like, I think that's the biggest reason for me, for my preference for the Latin Mass. And another thing is that every time I go to Latin Mass, I feel like I step outside of the temporal world. It's like this, I don't know, timeless time pocket,
Right.
it's like it's just, it's just so old but ever new. And knowing that so many saints celebrated mass this way, and knowing that this was very similar to the mass, like, thousands of years ago, literally, like I just love that unity that transcends time and space. I don't know. So that's another thing. And then it just was it's such a refreshing occasion when you live in this like crazy modern world. Everything is so fast paced, so temporary, and here you go to mass and it's like, ever ancient, ever new. Like I just, I love that aspect too.
Right. There's that kind
So
of suspension of time. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so like I just love that too. And then, when you come back into the time, into your life, into your world, like everything is reoriented towards Christ. That's, again, this is why I always prefer. So this is how in England I consistently went to Latin mass, and I got married and we moved here, and my husband was a Lutheran and he converted where we live. We live in the Northeast in a kind of a shrinking and dying diocese.
Yeah.
And and he has never been to a Latin mass, and he has never known any better. So I come here. I come here the first year of our marriage. We're going to the parish nearest to our house, and forgive the B word, but during every mass and after every mass, I'm bitching about the mass, and I am just like this cranky, and I'm like, and I don't mean to be. I mean, okay, by nature, I am a little bit of a skeptic. I don't know if you noticed, Angela. And I'm a little bit of sarcastic, but I'm going to this mass and I'm like, is that a quilt on the altar?
Oh my
Just
goodness.
say this. Why are they like food collection for the food bank, which is a worthy and admirable effort on like in the sanctuary, but
Oh,
everything bothers me because I've been going to Latin mass for the last 2 years. So my poor husband doesn't know any better, and then the closest Latin mass parish was an hour 20 minutes. So like we didn't have kids, like we didn't care, so we didn't go for a long time, and we kind of never quite found a home. Like we tried different parishes around here, and I just like didn't feel like once you see the Latin mass, it's like you just can't unsee it again.
yeah.
But one of the things that happened to me personally was that I kind of lowered my standards to where I went. And this is, again, my sinfulness, right? Nobody told me to lower my standards, right? Like, and so I kind of like, hey, jeans are okay. Hey, this is okay. And I'm not, obviously, if you're a working man, jeans are okay. Like, the Lord doesn't judge you because of that. But, like my view of the mass diminished in a way. Does that
Oh,
make sense? Like I didn't
definitely.
think it, yeah, I didn't think it a worthy time of my life to make the effort to get dressed up in a way. So it's not necessarily the Lord asks for it. It's like my attitude towards the mass changed.
Mm-hmm.
And we found a parish here that the Benedictines ran for a while, and they said a beautiful Novus Ordo, and they got rid of some of the questionable practices. We started to find a home, and the bishop of that diocese, who's now removed, like disgracefully,
That.
he got rid of the Benedictines, and then we found ourselves homeless again. And by then, of course, we had children. So then we had 4 kids. So it's not just our spiritual nourishment. Now, like we want to bring up our children around other good, faithful Catholics. We want them to have Catholic friends. We want them to see good liturgy. We can find it. And that's when also my husband started to read about the Latin Mass and the history of it, um, and the history of the last 100 years, how and why things have changed. And we started making the drive, an hour 20-minute drive to the nearest Latin mass
Wow.
parish. And I mean, like, can you imagine, like we wake up at 6:30
Yeah,
because
you
like
put us to shame for sure.
yeah, and our kids, like, so they have a
Yeah,
beautiful,
we do.
wonderful catechism. Yeah, they have a beautiful catechism. So our kids couldn't handle the catechism plus high mass. So we would go to low mass, then go to catechism. We made wonderful friends, and we weren't the weird family with 4 kids. It's like, I mean, it was just this, little haven in this crazy world of ours. And it was worth, going until COVID hit. And since mass has restarted, we've been going to a Novus Ordo parish again. We have a wonderful priest here, and we're trying to support him um, in his, like desire to create a Latin mass community. Like, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen right now, but this is our journey. So it's not like we're thinking it's like, oh, Vatican II is an invalid council, hence we shall go to the Latin mass only, or we think Novus Ordo is invalid, hence we shall go to Latin mass only. Like, no, here we are, like completely seeing basically awful liturgies. Homilies are awful. Like, I mean, one of the homilies I saw in the nearest parish I heard was that the priest said, "Hey, transfiguration didn't really happen."
Oh my goodness! Again, the Gnosticism.
I know, and I'm like, I don't think I want to come back here. Like, I mean, I don't know. I just don't feel like hearing homilies from heretical.
I feel like you're wrong.
I know. I'm like, but the thing is, like, if you're wrong on this, like, what else are you wrong on?
You're pretty much wrong about everything. If you're wrong about the nature of Christ himself, you're probably wrong about basically everything else. So, yeah.
Right. And what kind of CCD are you running here? Can I trust the future faith of my kids to you? Like, you know, there's all these questions, not like just this one homily. So, like, it was, so, like, I think, I mean, I'm not sure. Yes, you know what? There are jerkwad trads who kind of run their mouth. They don't know the meaning of, like, you know, obedience, reverence, or maybe not say everything that comes into your mind, you know, just holding your tongue is just a beautiful virtue I'm trying to learn and trying to teach my children, you know. So yes, there are just some really awful trads who shouldn't be believing what they do as Catholics, as faithful Catholics. But you know what? There are really a lot of awful Novus Ordo priests, let alone parishioners, let alone lay people, who believe and promote things they shouldn't. I'm sorry, by the way, I'm outside. I'm hiding from my children in the porch. So there's kind of outside voices, sounds
that's
coming
okay.
your way.
I just, I realized my mic was off until about now. So anyway, yeah.
Oh, I've been hearing you fine. So I don't know what's, So
Okay.
anyway, that's our journey, because I just wanted to share. This is like, and this is so common. The landmass parish we go like is bursting in the seams. They are like adding new, they're adding new masses so that they can accommodate the people, because everybody's like this. Like we find ourselves lost as faithful families, and this is where we find refuge. It's not because like
it's not because we think we're better than anyone else. Like it has nothing to do with that. I mean, maybe there are some people that has something to do with it, but you know, you see the same thing in the Novus Ordo churches too. I mean, but of course, in the inverse, I mean, I sat on a parish council for a Novus Ordo parish for 3 years, and the things that I heard discussed in our parish council meetings, there were times where I could hardly pick my jaw off the floor because I was so scandalized by the things that were encouraged or ideas that were brought to the table to implement at the parish were just like shocking and shockingly irreverent, you know. But and just the whole, there were so many misunderstandings of what was going on in the mass, right? Like there was this lack of comprehension, and it's not even totally their fault because the catechesis has been so poor over the last several decades. So yeah, I can definitely empathize with your experience. It's I mean, I haven't traveled all over the world the same way that you have, but my experience has been somewhat similar. Like I don't know. I guess maybe not as much. There's some similarities, but I started to become more exposed to the traditional form because we had friends that really had major reversions, and started going to a traditional Latin mass that is about 35 minutes away from where we live. And they were really encouraging us to go for a long time. But I felt like they were too pushy. And I don't know if you've noticed this about me, but when someone tells me I should or I shouldn't do something, I'm going to do the opposite by my nature. As long as it's not immoral. Like, but if you tell me that I should be doing something, I'm going to resist because I don't like being pressured into anything. So I felt like they were being pushy, and maybe they were somewhat what I perceived to be those judgmental trads or something. but it was over time, especially after working at LifeSite News, and I had more exposure to people who were traditionalists, that my heart kind of softened because I could see the devotion that they had, and I was seeing it so regularly. And my husband also is a convert, so I was growing and starting to lean more towards traditionalism, but he's already come such a long way being raised Protestant. I mean, his grandpa was the pastor of his little country church. Like, his exposure to Catholicism was so almost non-existent. So anything related to Catholicism, that's a huge step for him. And so going into traditionalism was a huge leap for him. And over time, it had to do more with the research that I was doing. And then when I would go to Mass and kind of compare it with what we were experiencing in our own parish, I felt like every time I went back to a Novus Ordo Mass, I was left wanting because it didn't have the same. Well, first, it didn't have it. I didn't experience the same reverence there, but it didn't feel set apart to me. Like, it didn't feel. Worshipped felt a little bit too horizontal, and less vertical. It just, there's such an emphasis on the people in the pews, and I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that because I don't want to say it's unimportant, but the reality is that whether or not there are people in the pews, the Mass will go on. Like, the people in the pews are not an integral component of the Mass. We're important and, like, I guess in that sense, integral, but we're not necessary for Mass. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes,
like
definitely, yeah.
And I feel like when you're at a Novus Ordo Mass, you're made to feel as if you are necessary. And there's a humility in acknowledging, like, the Mass will go on whether or not I am here. Because it's really not about me. It's about Mass. It's the holy sacrifice of the Mass. It's about our Lord and the Eucharist. And I just get to come here and participate, to offer up my small sacrifices in union with the holy sacrifice. And then in turn, I get to receive God's grace and receive himself, his body and blood, soul, and divinity. So it really has very little to do with me. I offer a meager offering, and then I get just, I get washed in the blood of Christ. Like, that's amazing to me. Mm-hmm. And especially, I noticed a big change, a big shift for us, because we started going to what I call a unicorn Novus Ordo, where mm-hmm. it was more reverent and traditional leaning, because we drive by several Catholic parishes on our way to Mass at our unicorn Novus Ordo. And we go there to support our priest as well, who is desiring to implement a traditional Latin Mass on Sunday. He celebrates one every Tuesday night, but we want to support him. And even my husband, because I was like you, we would go to these different parishes and I would be like apoplectic, raging when we would leave Mass because, they're taking kids out, during the gospel readings for Sunday craft time, not that they call it that, but that's what it is. You're like,
right,
all this stuff. And, sure, like, some people, I could see why parents like that. I mean, I don't enjoy wrestling with my kids for an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on the Mass. But, if we really believe that heaven and earth meet and this is the wedding feast of the Lamb, it's kind of incumbent that we treat it that way. And if it's the most holy thing we'll ever experience on this earth, why would we deny our children an opportunity to experience it and to form them in that? And so, like you, I kept telling my husband, and he agreed, that, they're kids at a young age, they're learning by example. And you can't explain to them why one thing is superior and one thing is inferior, especially when it's something as deep and complex as the liturgy, because there's so much in terms of symbolism and just basic understanding of language that they're not going to understand yet. But they can learn by example. And so it was really important that we went to a parish where that at least was being expressed as best as possible, given whatever the circumstances were. And we found ourselves at this Novus Ordo that was like this unicorn Novus Ordo, and we found a home there, even though it was a little bit more of a drive for us. I mean, like I said, we passed 4 churches, and 2 of them are within a mile or 2 of our house. I mean, we could walk up the street to one church.
Yes, the same. Like,
Yes,
the same for
exactly.
us too.
Yeah, I mean, it's like right there, and it's kind of embarrassing when I tell people, like, especially people in this community, because it's a very Catholic community, but it's very culturally Catholic, and I wouldn't say that everyone necessarily has a good understanding. You know what I mean? They don't quite have the understanding
Yes.
of this gift, you know?
Yeah, like a couple, like a couple from our current, like that parish right next to us. They saw us. They saw me taking a walk with my 5 kids, and we have a younger one, 8 months, Bernadette, and they saw
She
this
is
is a
so
Catholic
cute.
couple.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you. And the guy said, we are not farmers anymore. You don't need to keep having babies. And I'm like, what? I didn't even get it at first because like they're Catholic. Then I'm like, and I ended up saying, oh, we take this Catholic thing seriously.
Oh.
So, and I'm like, and then we moved on. It's like with this awkward silence, so like I understand what it means when they're nominally Catholic.
Right. Yes, exactly. And I mean, I was raised nominally Catholic. I mean, I think my mom somewhat tried, but again, it kind of ties back to this really poor catechesis that, I mean, my mom went to Catholic school, K through 12, and I feel like over the last few years, she's just starting to kind of open up the doors a little bit more to her faith. And we may or may not have gone to mass on most Sundays, but even so, I remember going to a Catholic parish growing up. This is where I was confirmed, and the priest would, and this was a Novus Ordo, and the priest would not refer to God as being masculine, so he would change God's preferred pronouns in the prayers.
That's so like insensitive of him. God tells him to call him.
I know.
Him.
God told him. Yes, exactly. And Jesus said that he is the Father, So, I mean, yeah, I would agree. It's very insensitive, to be honest. But I remember my mom, that was one of the things that my mom would get so angry about. And, it's like, well, here we are in the middle of Bodug nowhere with no other Catholic church in sight. And it was a very Protestantized area to begin with. In fact, it was rather anti-Catholic. And so it made perfect sense why this Catholic church was so lukewarm, because there just wasn't that tenacity burning within the priest or within many people in the parish. I mean, we had the acoustic guitar, folk music type of, liturgy. It was felt banners, everything, the whole bit. And that's environment that I was raised in. So to come into adulthood and desiring substance for my children in a way that I never felt like I received, that journey really did lead us to traditionalism, and I love it. I mean, we don't go to a TLM every Sunday. Would I like to? Yeah. I mean, if I were being honest, I would like that. And I don't think that the Second Vatican Council is an invalid council or anything, but I do think it has felt, when I compare the two, I feel like the liturgy is impoverished when I go to Novus Ordo. It leaves me wanting. So that's why we prefer the traditional Mass.
Yeah, I mean, the same here. And I can say this is true for most of the Latin Mass goers. I mean, we just want to try to live an authentic Catholic life and raise our children in the faith. We are not after to, undermine the bishops, the Holy Father, or I don't know. Like, does it make sense? I think like there is just this misunderstanding. And you know what? There are cranky tradis. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh my
Obviously.
goodness, yeah, yes. I mean,
Yeah,
that was a reason why I waited so sadly, it's a reason I waited so long to really go and experience a Latin mass firsthand, was because I was, like I said, I don't like feeling like I'm being told that I'm stupid or wrong for not attending or doing something. So I resisted in pride. But
yeah, and then my answer is like, you know what? You go to Latin mass and be a cheerful trad. Then
or as
it
Scott Hahn will say, a glad trad,
glad
which I
trad.
really love.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So now I'm like, you know what? There's no. It's like saying that, hey, I'm not gonna be Catholic anymore because of the sex abuse scandals. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense because there aren't any sinners in the church. It's the same. There are really
Right.
cranky trads and they don't know how to deal with newcomers. Yes, yes, you be the one who is welcoming. Like when we started going
Right.
to this Latin mass, there was a couple there. They would just after and before, little before every mass, they would greet newcomers, and they didn't make you wear mantillas or anything like that. They
Oh
were
yeah.
very, very welcoming, and it was beautiful. And you go and be that, like, don't let the mad crazy trads run the parish then.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't think that's a good enough thing. And it is something that needs to be addressed in landmass parishes. But honestly, I don't think it's as bad of a problem as people make it out to be.
Well, and I think too, it's always the people who have, you know, I just think about, and even in terms of politics, like you always have the people that are screaming, and they seem the loudest.
Right.
And when you're super loud, it feels like, well, everyone must think that way, but that's just not true. And it's,
Right.
you don't want to make the exception the rule.
Yeah,
It's always
exactly.
dangerous to do that.
And like one weekend I was out, and my husband, like for a conference or something, my husband took all the kids to the Latin mass, and so 4 kids, and it was Palm Sundays, and you know what happens on Palm Sundays with palm leaves, like
I like
no
where this
kid
is
like.
going.
Yes, I'm like, why are we still doing this, Holy Mother Church? Like, can we not have one leaf per family? But
Yes.
no, every child has to have one. So anyway, so my husband, 4 kids and a lot of palm leaves. And this old lady comes in and he says, your kids were really badly behaved. And my husband, who is, who does not take crap again from anybody, I am sorry. And he turns to the lady and says, look, lady, I am doing the best I can. You need to cut me some slack. And then she would kind of tottered off. And I'm like,
Good for him.
yeah,
I had a woman at our parish, not the TLM parish we go to, but at the Novus Ordo parish we go to, that made me cry one Easter vigil. Was it Easter vigil or? Yeah, it must have been an Easter vigil. And I had a newborn and 3 somewhat older kids. All my kids are young. I mean, my oldest turned 6 here in a few weeks. So it was myself. My husband was working. And I brought all of them by myself because I just love the Easter vigil. And the newborn was crying the whole time. And when I thought maybe hopefully my other kids would kind of fall asleep, none of them did. And so they were terrible. And this woman was so mean. Like, just, how women can be. Like, they look at you. Like, so she walked out, walked down, came out of the elevator. She's older. She came out and she gave me this look of sheer disgust and shook her head at me, like very obviously, and then stuck her nose up in the air and walked out. It's like, new mom with a
how
newborn
could you
baby.
bring children to mass? How dare you?
I know. And I just remember I already felt horrible because I'd been fighting with them for the last 2 hours because I,
Right.
was fighting valiantly to stay in mass because it's the most beautiful liturgy of the year. And I remember crying almost the entire way home because
I'm so
felt
sorry.
yeah. So I mean,
See,
it
like,
happens in both. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, it's not this is not just a tratty issue.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you one more because this is really funny to me. Even though it's awful, so there was this newcomer lady, and because this is so passive aggressive that
Ah,
Okay, so she's like, it's her first time at Latin Mass, and she had to breastfeed her baby, like, which I do. Look, my baby's crying. I'm going to breastfeed on the pew. Like, I'm not going to go to the bathroom because it smells and it's gross. And I don't want to miss Mass so I'm just going to breastfeed him or her there. And I can do it like without flaunting my breast. Thank you very much. Yeah. Like, yes, I can do it. It's amazing what you can accomplish. So this lady does it. And one of these, like, somebody puts a little like a note into the backpack of this lady on one of those side pockets. Like, it's she or he doesn't even confront this lady about like how awful and immodest that she was breastfeeding. And I'm like, really? Really? Like, so like,
well, I mean, she wasn't like waving her breast around like everybody. I mean, I bet she wasn't. I'm going to put money down that she was not like waving it around like, hello, everybody, look at me breastfeeding my child.
I know. It's like, you know what? You can look somewhere else. Also, like, yeah. But anyway, so it's like, you know what? Yes, it happens. And as you said, like, your experience shows, like, we have been shamed, I mean, mostly positive experience, but even in a Novus Ordo. Yeah. And like, priests have called us out for our fussy kids, which like weren't really fussy. It's like when there are 5 of them, it's like there's this like hum of the highway in a way. Does it make sense? Like, there's this, like,
oh my goodness. I looked in the back of of the TLM that we went to this morning, and there were probably close to 10 parents with babies that they were bouncing, just standing in the back. And that had nothing to do with all of the parents that were in the entry of the church with their kids too. But it made me laugh because it was like all these bouncing babies. Everyone's just trying to keep them quiet. Oh, it was super funny.
Yeah, but I just also remember asking before we went and we experienced Latin Mass with 4 kids. We were worried that our kids were going to stand out, and it's so reverent and quiet. Is this going to work? So we called the priest. He's like, I have no idea what's going on in the back, which meaning his back, meaning the whole parish. Like, he has like, and it's like one of the beauties of Ad Orientem. The priest doesn't care if your baby cries because he has other business to attend, and he doesn't need to,
well, yeah, I mean, as long as your kid's not throwing a full-blown tantrum,
Right.
It's like, sure, like, you should be respectful of people praying, but understandably, kids are kids. Like, our expectations have to be in accordance with understanding that they are children.
Right. And they are the future of the church.
Yes.
And like, I know it's like, and it was great when we first go there. We started to sit on this like discreet part of the church, and there was another family with 4 or 5 kids, and it was great. We didn't feel alone, or like if one of the kids made a sound, we all shared the blame, right?
Yes.
Like, it came from this corner of the church. So
have you ever heard
always
this? Oh, I was going to say, have you ever heard this phrase? If the church isn't crying, it's dying.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, in this like diocese I live in, that's another thing. That's a good segue in a way. Like, I was thinking about the effects of this, the Traditionis custodes, because I'm like, okay, in reality, what is going to happen? How is this going to affect our lives? And I'm thinking, your average bishop, like the bishop of my current diocese, let's say Bishop, I don't know, let's come up with what's a very common, Smith, right? Bishop Smith is so busy because his whole, like, he needs to close all these parishes and the churches, and he needs to deal with these disgruntled parishioners who don't want to see their churches closed. So this motu proprio from Rome comes, and you're supposed to kind of discipline the one parish who actually gives you money, right?
Yeah.
And actually has all these kids and
has the babies.
Vocations.
Yes.
Yeah, has the babies, has the vocations, has the numbers. So I'm thinking, I'm Bishop Smith. I don't need to be trad. Unless I am ridiculously liberal, I'm going to let things be.
It's that's kind of my hope for some of this too, is that it'll just kind of maybe be ignored, because it's really not in the best. Because the reality is, like, if a church isn't crying, it's dying. And I don't know about you, but the parish we went to today is mostly young families. And I know you hear that online, but if you are somebody going to a traditional Latin Mass, honestly, it is almost entirely young families and young adults. I mean, it is crazy. But it makes sense because people want the massive antiquity. They want to, like you said, like that enjoy knowing that this is the mass that so many of the saints were formed in and devoted themselves to. You know, I just don't see how you could not gain from that. You know, it has beautiful sacred music, and it just there's all the things. I mean, I always tell people to read Dr. Kwasniewski's book on reclaiming your Roman Catholic birthright. It's such a good book in terms of explaining why the traditional Latin Mass is the way that it is. I don't know. Have you read that book?
I haven't, no, but I love. I mean, when I started like reading about the Latin Mass, like the meanings, like every little thing has a meaning.
Yes.
And it's not like somebody comes up with this like, oh, this would be great if we introduce like this organic development, which is one of the problems with the Novus Ordo. It was like such a sudden change, like, in the Catholic Church, we are not very fond of revolutions, like sudden changes. It's a slow moving
or reformation.
Yeah. Yes. This is a slow moving machine. You're going to take your time because we want to make sure that it's right. Yeah. So, and I read Latin Mass Explained before I wrote that the Beginner's Guide to Latin Mass. Which is like very, very ridiculously simple. It's for your absolute newcomer.
It's written for somebody it's written for a 5-year-old, which I love.
Yes. And the newcomer, like, give it to your kids and give it to the newcomer.
That's what I mean. Like, I don't know if you watch The Office, but there's an episode where Michael Scott is asking somebody to explain something to him like he's 5. And that's how I feel when I I look at it. I'm like, explain this to me like I'm 5. You just give me the quick and dirty of it. I don't have the time to read all the minutia of the liturgy right now, but if I can understand the basics of what's going on. But that's the other thing too. So I feel like I have to say this because, again, trads are kind of accused of being so rigid, but I find that the ability and capacity for me to unite myself in prayer is so much greater in the traditional liturgy because I'm not expected to have all these responses to do that are these robotic responses that I just say and do. Like I don't need, again, it's this humility and understanding. I don't need to know all this stuff, but I can pray and offer up these prayers with the priest. And I don't have to I don't have to be working off of the same rubrics. Like, yes, make the sign of the cross when everyone is making the sign of the cross, say your quick line at Cum Spiritu Tuo, like do all that stuff. But
even that is all optional.
And that's all exactly
all optional.
So that's the thing is like trads are accused of being so rigid, and yet the Latin Mass has so much more freedom. Like that's the beauty of it.
Like for the laity, there's no rubrics. Like we did this like book, but we are like
that's the rubric
customs, so you don't feel odd. Like if you want to just sit on your butt, that's fine. Like my husband prays the rosary during Mass.
Yes,
that's fine. Like whatever you want to do. Like it's like the Lord accepts your sacrifice, and it doesn't have to be this like outwardly action in a way. Like you said, like just you don't have to respond.
Yep, it's like this robotic, you talk, I respond. But that's when I said earlier that it just feels to me like the Novus Ordo, and I don't mean this whole thing to be like this bashing session on the Novus Ordo, but there is a difference in quality that just can't be denied. Like when you have experienced it, and the first time, yes, it's like a culture shock going from the Novus Ordo to a traditional Latin Mass. And the first time I went, and the second time, and maybe even the third time, I sort of was like, wow, I'm not really sure how I feel about this. This is just so different. And then the more I thought about it, I sort of realized like, but it's supposed to be, you know what I mean? Like we are a people set apart, and it has to be, our worship should be so set apart. We should be so drawn into the mysteries of God that the liturgy should reflect that the best that it can. So anyway, those are the things I also wanted to add, because I think sometimes too people get caught up on, well, maybe I shouldn't go if I don't know Latin. Absolutely go. It doesn't matter if you know Latin or not. Just go.
And no,
pray.
it doesn't matter. And the thing is, like, I don't want to spoil this for people, but it's the same thing every time. So like, you may not understand it the first time, but you go 10 times, you're like, oh, okay, I know what et cum spiritu means, or or like memorize the Hail Mary. It's not that long of a prayer, like my 6-year-old memorized it just from hearing. It's not so hard. Like, give yourself some intellectual credit. You can figure it out. Yes. And you don't need to know the Eucharistic prayers. Also, like, there are missals, they're side by side. Like, you can figure everything out, even if you don't, you don't speak Latin, which we all should speak Latin. Don't get me wrong. We should all learn Latin, but it should not ever.
It shouldn't be an obstacle. Don't let it be an obstacle for you.
No. Yeah, exactly. So, okay. So those are our thoughts. So going forward, what do we do? Like, I have this pessimistic inclination, and my husband is completely opposite of me. Thanks be to God.
Yeah.
But like today, like even just talking to you really helped me. Like, look, this is not the end of the world. This is one motu proprio, and there will be more.
Well, and I think you described it so well before we decided to hit the record button, but it's like an executive order, right? Like,
right.
And the next, because really this is in response to a previous motu proprio of Pope Benedict XVI. And like the next Pope could come along and, in a sense, overturn this motu proprio. But also, like I said, I'm kind of hopeful that maybe a lot of bishops will sort of conveniently turn a blind eye to some of the dictates of this motu proprio. So,
right. Yeah, exactly. So,
but even if they don't, so what if all the bishops around the world in the United States do really clamp down on the traditional Latin Mass? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Can you rephrase that again?
Like what are your thoughts on how Catholics should respond if the bishops maybe aren't as lax or lenient as we would like them to be? And what if they really come down hard on it? I mean, we're seeing it already, like, for example, in the Archdiocese of Arlington, the traditional Latin Mass is being canceled, for example. So what do you think people in those dioceses should do? Yeah,
I mean, like, we are not going to obviously disappear. We are not going to go to, start holding hands and, like, I don't know,
taking on the Orans posture, all that stuff.
Right. Please don't hold my hand. Please. First of all, it is not COVID friendly.
Yeah.
Or maybe too COVID friendly. I don't know. Don't do it. But no, but the thing is, I think obviously we're called to obedience, and this is probably the hardest part of being Catholic, because like I want to just like, oh, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to go like somewhere else. Obviously we can't do it. We're Catholic. We're called to obedience, even when we don't like it. This is, I always try to remember, I don't remember where I did it, but that like, this is one virtue Satan cannot imitate. Right. Like,
that's so true.
So like, okay, we just need to remember that obedience, and that said, I just read it somewhere and I don't remember where I read it. I'm sorry. I don't mean to plagiarize. Like, I kind of like read a ton of stuff and they're all kind of mishmashed in my head. I read subversive obedience. Have you heard that? Like, look, we're going to obey you.
I like the sound of it.
Yeah. So we are going to obviously obey our bishops. Obviously the Holy Father, we will pray for them, like, I fast for them, offer up our rosaries, like, as much as it's a spiritual battle and all that. And at the same time, we can ask for our pastors to make the Novus Ordo more reverent. We go to we definitely go to a unicorn Novus Ordo. Like we have an excellent pastor, and it's a beautiful Novus Ordo, and and we can try to raise the standards where we are. Again, with charity, and to remember that priests deal with a lot of other people, and but like, don't leave Holy Mother Church. There is nowhere else to go. A lot of people are inclined to go to Orthodox,
SSPX or
right. Don't do it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree with you totally.
Yeah. So, but yes, I think I just need to find that subversive obedience. I'll Google it.
But I think too, like,
change it where we are.
Yeah, and I think this is a history. We talk a lot about the history of the church, and right now, I think the church. I've heard again. Now I'm stealing, but I've heard this description of the church right now, kind of being like the ship in which the disciples were in with our Lord, and they're in the storm, and there's water coming up on the deck, and they're starting to go under, and the disciples are fearful. And when Jesus wakes up, he asks them, "Why are you fearful?" And then he calms the waves and the storm, and he can do that in the church right now. But for me, it is, so there's that, but also like Noah's Ark, like I don't want to get off the ark, right? Because there's a storm outside, and because at the end of the day, there's really nowhere to land right now.
Yes, exactly.
And so I think leaning on our Lord, and he understands. What was I was reading in Matthew today, I believe. There are multiple times in like chapter 5 or 6, but also again in 9, Matthew describes the multitudes coming to our Lord, and he takes pity on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And it says that multiple times. And I'm so moved by that imagery because I think we feel that way. We feel like sheep without a shepherd. And so, but the Lord doesn't abandon us, right? Like he continues to teach us, inform us. And I think in great trial is when great saints are made. And so here we have an opportunity as Catholics not to run away from Holy Mother Church, but to lean into her bosom and say, like, I will not abandon you because you're my mother. And where others may not be honoring you, I will do the best that I can to be a faithful son or daughter. And so that's my encouragement. I just think this is an opportunity. God is permitting this right now, and so we have to do our part to be conduits of his mercy and his grace and his justice. And the best way that we can do that is to remain faithful. And to go
exactly. And I can't emphasize the importance of fasting and praying for this. Like, I mean, I feel like this is such a spiritual battle because like that sadness and this like heaviness that has come, like even to me, who is not like I'm not a spiritually aware person, not mystical at all. But even like I could feel that like there is just more to this than just So like please fast, offer up, ask for Our Lady's intercession, like do that's my 8-month-old making sounds in the background. I feel like I have to apologize constantly. But this is not crying. But so like just do the spiritual battle and support your pastor, your priest, and
find like-minded people in your church.
Right. Don't
build community. Yeah.
Right. Don't like suffer alone. Respectfully, again, write to your bishop. And one of the things we seem to only be writing to our bishops when there's trouble. Like if your bishop lets your Latin Mass parish be as they can be, just write him a letter of thank you and encouragement. And so we find ourselves in times such as these, and the Lord knew all of these were going to happen when he put us in these times, and he knows we can handle it. And he has given us the tools. We still have the sacraments, and we have everything we need to fight in a way, and then just raise our children faithful and Catholic. So hang in there.
Yeah.
That's all I feel like,
Yeah.
hang in there. And it's, there will be another motu proprio, Lord willing, sooner than later. And then it will be free again. But another thing is, all these people who have tasted the beauty and reverence of the Latin Mass, they are not going to disappear overnight. I feel like this is like that proverbial toothpaste out of the tube that you can't put it back in. You can't stuff it back in. Like we just we've experienced it and we crave it. And Lord willing, it will only, even if Latin Mass is gone, Lord willing, it will only make Novus Ordo better and more reverent and more worthy worship for our Lord.
Well, and that makes me think of just another thing to help our listeners if they are going from a traditional Latin Mass and find themselves at a Novus Ordo. Don't do what Derry and I have done, where we sort of loosen our standards going to a Novus Ordo, even in terms of dress and that external presentation, because I think you have a lot to offer in a Novus Ordo parish in terms of even dressing reverently and approaching the Eucharist with deep love. Those are the things that sometimes leave me upset when I go to a Novus Ordo. But anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah.
Don't treat the Novus Ordo differently simply because the rite is different,
Right.
So
exactly. So anyway, fight the good fight, be prayerful, be obedient. It's like these are not coming easy to me. I tell you, people, I am not obedient by by nature. So but hang in there and let us know, like, if this affected you, if you need to kind of vent, find like-minded Catholics, and especially like on social media too. Like that's one of the things, like we just don't want to be like bitter and vindictive. That charity doesn't come easy, I understand, but like please be careful how you present yourself, even on social media. Like you could lead somebody astray, scandalize, or tell like people would say like, ha, we told you so. These are a bunch of crazy trads,
right? So, like, don't be the person stuffing notes into somebody's diaper bag.
Yes, please don't be that
person. Don't do it literally or in the proverbial sense on social media.
Right, exactly. So that's that. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I think we have vented long enough.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. Yep. I have nothing else to add at this time. So.
Okay, perfect. As usual, share and support us. And we are on Twitter. Angela is back and she's stalking me on Facebook and Twitter. I don't want to be your friend, Angela. Stop it.
Yeah, I mean, and if anyone wants to find me on Twitter, I think it's like A. Erickson Thanks or something, and then I'm on Instagram too. But yeah, I decided to get back on so I could help promote some of these projects that I have going on. It was not a happy homecoming. I did not want to do it, but here I am.
I know. Yeah. So like, let us know what you think and how it affected you, and we can lick each other's wounds and move on, Lord willing. Okay. Well, thank you very much for listening.